Hello my quilting friends, Leah Day here with a new video for the Free Motion Quilting Project. Today we're going to learn how to quilt living feathers. It's a combination of feathers and leaf shapes and I'm sure you're going to love it. So to get started with this design, we're going to stitch a leaf shape and it needs to be fairly large, as you can see from the one that I've already stitched. You want it to really be more than enough space for the feathers to go in and spread out. So I just come to a point and then return to my starting point, come out and come back in. And now I'm going to fill in the center of that leaf with the vine line. Just stitch a wiggly line into the center and then echo that line back to the starting point. Okay, now time to start the feathers. And these are going to be fairly small. I'm just going to bounce out and around, basically coming right to the edge of the leaf shape and then returning to the vine line. And I like these travel back feathers. Travel along the back of the feather and then come back down, so you have consistent travel stitching basically on the back of every single feather. And I think that looks really good and it adds a little bit of interest, a little bit more focus in the spaces between the feather shapes. Okay, so I've got this little tip. I'm going to put just a little feather up there. And I can't quilt feathers backwards very well, so I'm going to travel stitch all the way back to the beginning and quilt the feathers on the opposite side. And that's perfectly fine. Sometimes you might have to travel stitch. If you have the ability to quilt feathers forward and backwards, that's great. Not everyone is good at that. So this was kind of the trick that I learned, how to get around having to quilt feathers in two different directions. So now I'm just matching up this feather shape. That looks good. And I'm going to quilt all the way back to the beginning. There we go. So that is one unit. And now I'm going to travel stitch and pivot off of this point with some echoes. I wanted to put a few lines of echo quilting between this feather and the next living feather. And the reason is I think it looks better. It puts a little space within the design. Of course, you certainly could have these all stacked together. It just might not, it might start to looking a little too cluttered. Okay, so I'll branch out with another shape. And you can see this design really wants to expand. It really wants to stand out and show off. So this is going to be a great design for the background of your quilt. It's one of the places that I used it. I used it in the background of a goddess quilt called Emergence, and it really worked wonderfully in that area. So again, I'm branching out with my feathers. The one downside I would say of this design is it is fairly complex. There's a lot of steps to it and a lot of careful stitching. You have to be slow and careful, especially when quilting the smaller feathers within the tip of this area. So this is not a very speedy design, and that's the one downside of it. You just have to remember all the steps and work very patiently, one motif at a time, one feather shape at a time. The one good thing is each leaf shape does fill up quite a lot of space in your quilt. You expand them and make them really big, then they will fill your quilt more quickly. So now I'm travel stitching back to the beginning, and I'm going to pivot and echo. I've got here at the tip, I'm just going to travel stitch right along the outer edge, so that way I can swing around. And I can build up rows of quilting just back and forth, and that's just going to add a really nice amount of space between this shape and the next one I'm going to put right here. So that's it for living feathers. I've used this design in the backgrounds of my quilts. Here it is, stitched in the background of Emergence, one of my goddess quilts. So this design is going to work best when you have a lot of space that you could quilt it in, really let those leaf shapes, kind of expand and stand out, and then it's going to be that much easier to fill each leaf shape with a feather. So have lots of fun stitching this design, and of course, share it with your friends. We love it when you share the videos and these cool designs with your friends, because we want to cover the world with beautiful quilting. Until next time, let's go quilt.